The blast that gutted the starboard engine came with the elegance of disaster bright, instantaneous, and utterly indifferent. Commander Zira Erevel, Zer to anyone who respected her mandibles, watched her navigation board blossom into a firework of sparks and liquefied circuitry. The bridge of the Scarlet Raptor filled with the sharp stench of burning synthetics and the sour, instinctive fear of a dozen Corvani soldiers who suddenly understood they were about to meet a planet at terminal speed. "We've been hit," shouted Drexen, the navigator, his scales flickering from panic violet to the dull gray of surrender. "Truly," Zer snapped, for hands moving over what was left of her controls. "I assumed we were renovating." The ship shuddered again, a sickening corkscrew that turned the viewports into a spinning smear of cloud and Osha land. Zer's mandibles tightened. 3 conflict cycles along the Centauri border had taught the Dominion many lessons, but one stood above the rest. Humans did not behave like sensible enemies. They improvised. They lied with frightening sincerity, and they treated war like a set of physics problems with a different answer every day. Dominion broadcasts insisted humans were brutal primitives who had stumbled into Starflight. By accident, violent apes with plasma rifles, barely sentient, allegedly fond of eating captives and decorating camps with bones. Zer had repeated those lines in briefings. She'd heard officers laugh as they played grainy clips of human savagery. She had believed it, because believing made the trigger easier. Now, as the Scarlet Raptor fell like a broken spear toward the brown-green sphere below, Zer had 47 seconds to wonder whether the stories were true. The impact erased the question with noise and light. She woke to blood in her mouth and a faint crackle that made her think of radiation alarms. Words moved through the air, harsh, guttural syllables that meant nothing to her. But the tone wasn't triumph, and it wasn't cruelty. It was urgent, coordinated. Survivors count 7. Maybe 8 need evac. Zer tried to lift herself and met the kind of pain that turns thought into static. Her lower left arm screamed. Something inside her thorax felt wrong in a deeper way, an internal misalignment. Bones where bones should not be, she hissed. Vision splitting into 6 overlapping fields as her compound eyes forced focus. A shadow fell across her. A human stood above her, huge even for their species, wrapped in the ridged insect-like armor their soldiers favored. The helmet's visor hid most of his face, but his eyes were visible through the tint. Brown, alert, and absurdly warm. "Hey," the human called over his shoulder. "This one's awake." Zer braced for the usual. The rifle butt, the restraints, the casual cruelty Dominion doctrine promised her would follow. Instead, the human crouched, moving as if he was approaching a wounded animal that might bolt. His gloved hands hovered, careful, not grabbing. "Easy," he said, voice pitched low. "You're hurt. We're going to help you." Help. The word snagged on Zer's mind like a hook. Prisoners were bargaining chips at best. At worst, they were lessons. Corvani camps were not built for comfort, and human captives seldom left them whole. Zer had seen enough to stop pretending otherwise. She tried to speak and only managed a wet gurgle. The human's posture tightened with concern rather than satisfaction. "Medic," he barked. "I need a medic here." Looks like internal bleeding. More humans appeared, brisk and efficient, and something cold pressed against Zer's neck. Her thoughts softened, blurred at the edges, and the world slid away. When she woke again, the first surprise was that she was alive. The second was that she wasn't in pain. The third was that she was lying in a bed, an actual bed, with clean sheets and a pillow that cradled her skull ridges in gentle support. Zer flexed her upper right hand and brushed the fabric, stunned by its softness. A quiet hum came from nearby machines. A screen displayed her vital signs in symbols she couldn't read, but instinctively recognized as diagnostic. A line ran into her arm. Which arm? She looked down and found her lower left limb encased in a rigid cast, set at a precise angle. The bone had been aligned. The swelling had been managed. She could feel the dull, controlled ache of healing rather than the screaming chaos of untreated fracture. "Oh, good," a voice said from the doorway. "You're awake." Zer turned. Too fast, and regretted it instantly. Her neck reminded her politely, but firmly, that she was not built for sudden heroics. While stitched together, a human woman stepped in, wearing white clothing marked with small, bright patches. She was young by human measures, dark-skinned, with violet-tinted braids falling in careful ropes over her shoulders. Her expression was open, calm. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Aisha Okonkwo," she said, "Chief Medical Officer. How are you feeling?" Zer stared, 6 eyes blinking out of sync. Aisha didn't flinch. She walked to the monitors, tapped at a tablet, checked readings. Like this was a routine morning. "Compound fracture," Aisha said. "Matter of fact, nasty. But we set it properly. You also had internal bleeding handled. The good news is you should recover fully." Zer forced her throat to work. "Why?" Aisha paused. "Why? What? Why heal? Enemy." The human's face shifted in a way Zer couldn't map to her training files. Not anger, not triumph. Something quiet as sadness, maybe, and resolve braided together. "Because you were hurt," Aisha said simply, "and hurt people need help." It didn't fit. Zer filed the statement away like an unexploded munition. "Where crew?" she asked. Aisha's mouth softened into something that might have been reassurance. 7 survivors. They're here, injured, but stable. You were closest to the impact zone. 7. 12 had launched. 5 were gone. The loss settled into Zer's chest like a cold stone. She closed her eyes and opened them again because grief didn't change math. "Prison now?" she asked. "We're keeping you in medical until you're safe to move," Aisha replied. "A few more days. Then you'll go to a detention wing." "It isn't what you're expecting." She pointed to a button near the bed. "If you need anything, water, food, pain control, press it. Someone will come." And then she left, as if the concept of offering comfort to an enemy wasn't remarkable at all. 3 days became 5. Zer's body did what Corvani bodies did best. Repaired itself quickly, stitching bone and tissue with ruthless efficiency. Human doctors checked her often and spoke to her like she was a patient, not a specimen. They brought food adapted for her biology, strange, but edible. They explained what they were doing when she asked. rather than treating her questions as insolence. One physician, a young man with nervous hands and bright eyes, spent an afternoon showing her scans and describing procedures with academic enthusiasm. "Your secondary cardiovascular network is amazing," he said, practically vibrating with interest. "If humans had anything like it. Impacts that would kill us." He stopped, flushed. "Sorry, I'm rambling." "It is informative," Zer admitted, because it was. When they finally moved her, it was not in shackles but in a wheelchair, guided gently down a corridor. Her leg, damaged in the crash, objected less now. The doors they passed were heavy, but not ominous. The walls were clean. The air smelled of disinfectant and warmed metal rather than rot. The detention wing, when she saw it, didn't resemble the Dominion's idea of captivity. Each Corvani had a room, not a cager room, with a bed, a desk, and a window that showed an alien sky. A common area offered seating, screens for entertainment, and shelves of translated books. It looked disturbingly like a modest dormitory. Her surviving soldiers stood when she arrived, their scales shifting through relief and confusion. Sergeant Threll, broad-shouldered and proud even with a bandage wrapped around his chest, hurried forward. "Commander," he said, voice catching. "We thought—" "I'm here," Zer said, lifting her functional arm. "Report everything." The story came in fragments, as if their minds were still trying to glue reality together. Humans pulled them from wreckage one by one. Injured were carried. Medics triaged without striking anyone. No restraints beyond what transport required. No interrogation. No beatings. They asked our names. Threll said slowly, "Not ranks, names." One apologized. Another soldier added, scales flashing a stunned, washed-out gray. "For bumping me during evacuation." Apologized. "They brought blankets," said Velron, holding a folded square of fabric like it might be a weapon. "Soft ones." Zer listened, silent, and felt a dangerous thought sprout. What if the footage was manufactured? Treason, whispered the part of her trained to survive Dominion politics. But the seed had already taken root. Interrogation? Zer asked. No. Harm? No. Finally, Private Exile Young, newly blooded, eyes too large for his face, spoke, voice small. "Commander, maybe the stories were wrong." 2 weeks into captivity, Zer discovered the chair problem. Her arm healed well. Her leg improved steadily. But the crash had left an unpleasant injury along her lower spine, an analog to a herniated disc. The human doctors said they recommended rest and physical therapy. The common room chairs, however, were built for human hips and spines, not Corvani structures. Zer learned this when she sat down and felt pain lance through her back like a blade. A sound escaped her before she could stop it. Her scales flashed pain-white. Sergeant Threll was beside her instantly. "Commander, it's the chairs." Zer hissed through clenched mandibles. "Not compatible." A voice from the doorway. "Is there a problem?" Colonel Marcus Webb, base commander. Zer had met him briefly while half sedated. He carried himself with the relaxed authority humans used like armor. His face was lined like someone who had spent too many years watching young people die. Pharrell spoke first. The seating causes spinal pressure for our physiology. Webb's expression shifted to genuine concern. Is it hurting you? Admitting weakness to an enemy made Zer's instincts snarl. But the pain was undeniable. Yes, Webb exhaled sharply, as if frustrated with himself. We should have anticipated that. I'm sorry. He lifted a communicator. Logistics. We need ergonomic seating for Corvani physiology in detention block priority. All of them. He ended the call and looked back at Zer. Until then, can we bring cushions? Immediately, Zer stared. Why? Webb blinked. Why? Cushions. Why care? Zer demanded, the question finally breaking free. We came to kill your people. You shot us down. We are enemies. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked toward the window like he needed distance to speak. My grandfather fought. In the last big war on Earth, he said. He was captured, spent 2 years in an enemy camp. It could have been hell. By all rights, it should have been. But his captors followed rules, fed him, housed him, treated him as human. He turned back, eyes steady. He told me you can measure a civilization by how it treats its prisoners. Mercy isn't weakness. It's discipline. It's refusing to let the war decide who you become. Zer's mandibles loosened, confusion and something else tangling together in her chest. Our leaders told us you were monsters, she said quietly, that you'd torture us, eat us. Webb gave a humorless half-smile. War needs monsters. Makes killing easier when the enemy isn't a person. He paused, then added, I'm sure your propaganda paints us as demons too. It does. Pharrell admitted, almost ashamed. Then maybe, Webb said. We should both work harder to see clearly. The new chairs arrived 3 days later. They were purple Corvani ceremonial color, chosen by someone who had bothered to learn, and they had adjustable supports shaped for Corvani. Spines. When Zer sat, the pain eased into something manageable. Comfort. In a prison built by enemies. Her soldiers tested the chairs with cautious awe. Velron ran his claws along the armrest as if feeling a myth made real. Private Mixer tried to joke. Voice to thin. Commander, what if we never want to leave? No one laughed, because they all felt the bite of the thought beneath it. A young guard on evening duty, Private Marcus Chen, not the doctor, started asking questions. Curious questions. What did different scale shades mean? How did Corvani's sleep cycles work? Did they have poems? Most prisoners found him irritating. Zer found him dangerous in a different way. He was making them real to each other. Why bother? Zer asked him one night. Marcus shrugged with the easy confidence of the young. Because you're interesting. And my grandma used to say you can't understand someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. He glanced at Zer's clawed feet and grinned. Not sure the shoe part applies, Zer considered. We say, you don't know a being until you've shed scales in their sun. Marcus's eyes widened. That's actually beautiful. He laughed softly. You have poetry, humor, families. The arms and eyes are just accessories. Zer didn't know how to answer that. Not every human was kind. A new guard, Corporal Bennett, arrived carrying grief like a weapon. He spoke of his brother killed at Proxima Station, and hatred had carved grooves into his voice. He muttered animals when he thought no one listened. The confrontation came at dinner. Private Exile returned his tray when Bennett blocked him. "Say please," Bennett said, like a civilized being. Exile's scales flickered confusion gray. Sorry." Bennett leaned closer. "Prove you're not just a bug in a uniform." Silence clamped down on the room. Zer pushed against her chair, ready to stand despite the pain. But Threll was faster. Placing himself between Exile and Bennett, under the interspecies convention, Threll said, voice steady, "Prisoners are entitled to dignified treatment." Bennett sneered, "Tell that to my brother." A cold voice cut through the air. "Corporal Bennett." Colonel Webb stood in the doorway, expression like stone. "My office, now." 30 minutes later, Webb returned alone. His exhaustion was visible, but so was the line he refused to cross. "I apologize," he said loudly enough for everyone. "That behavior dishonors this command. Corporal Bennett has been removed from duty and will face disciplinary action." Zer looked at him. "His brother, I know," Webb said, jaw tight. "Grief is not an excuse to become what we claim to oppose." He met Zer's gaze. "And your first instinct was to protect your soldier. That matters. Maybe none of us are monsters." Zer had no words for the strange ache that followed. In the 3rd month, the humans offered communication with home. Webb announced it like it was an ordinary administrative update. A neutral diplomatic channel had been arranged. Messages would be screened for military intelligence, but personal letters would pass. The common room filled with stunned, fragile hope. Soldiers who had accepted they were dead to their families suddenly had breath again. "Why?" Mixera asked, voice raw. Webb answered simply, "Because your families deserve peace." The letters that returned were knives and medicine, all at once. Zer's mother wrote of prayers to old gods and the stubborn certainty that a mother knows when her child still draws breath. She wrote of harvests, newborns, and the quiet grind of life continuing beneath the shadow of war. "You are alive," her mother wrote, "and you are being cared for. I do not understand, but I am grateful to whatever gods guide your captors. Hands, come home, my daughter. When this madness ends, come home." That night, the 7 survivors gathered and read a loud-breaking Corvani custom. Because something had already broken open inside them, they shared grief, relief, and the strange warmth of community built inside an enemy's walls. In month 5, a Dominion inspection team arrived for officials in formal attire, led by Director Pexler, a stately woman with skeptical orange shifting across her scales. "I am here to document any mistreatment," she said crisply. "You will find none," Zer replied, standing straighter than her injuries liked. They searched for 3 days, tested food for toxins, reviewed medical files, interviewed each prisoner privately, prodding for hidden abuse. They found chairs built for Corvani backs, clean rooms, translated books, careful documentation of everything. On the 3rd day, Zer found Director Pexler alone in the common room, staring at the purple chairs like they were an insult to her worldview. You seem troubled, Zer said. Pexela's scale shifted in a pattern Zer couldn't immediately name. I've inspected 7 facilities, she admitted. None match what we were told to expect. We were told humans were savages, Zer said softly. And now you have to write a report that doesn't fit the story. Pexela swallowed, throat working. What do I tell the council? The truth, Zer said, hearing Webb's words in her mind. Whatever the truth is. Pexela looked at her for a long time, then whispered. The truth may be more dangerous than any weapon. Perhaps, Zer said. That's why. It matters. The team departed. Zer never saw Pexela's report. But months later the ceasefire accelerated. And then, astonishingly, the war ended. Repatriation Day arrived under a clear sky. Zer stood at the threshold of Detention Block 7 with her crew behind her healed, changed, carrying invisible weight. Webb waited near the transport with base staff. The young guard Marcus Chen stood among them, trying to smile through something complicated. Webb offered his hand in the human greeting. Zer took it without hesitation. Your shuttle will bring you to Neutral Station Theta, Webb said. From there, home. Home tasted strange in Zer's mouth. What was home now? When she carried proof that her leader's monsters had warm eyes and compassionate hands. Thank you, she said, knowing the words were too small for what they contained. Webb's gaze held steady. The question isn't what you experienced here, Commander. It's what you choose to believe when you're back among your own. Zer didn't answer because she didn't have one yet. 10 years later, Zer stood before a monument on Station Theta where exchanges had once happened. Metal and crystal rose in intertwined forms, human and Corvani aesthetics braided together. Names were carved in both languages, those lost, those remembered. Children of multiple species ran laughing through the plaza, playing a game whose rules didn't require shared history, only shared joy, a familiar voice said. Ambassador. Zer turned to see Marcus Webb, older now, hair silvered, the same, steady eyes. Retired, he added quickly, smiling. And please, Marcus. Zer's scales shifted memory blue. It suits you. Across the plaza, another figure approached. Marcus Chen, no longer a boy, now a captain by the cut of his uniform. He was grinning nervously, and beside him walked a young Corvani woman with northern scale patterns. Her posture half curious, half brave. Ambassador Erevel, Chen said. This is Tressa, my fiancée. Zer blinked all 6 eyes, stunned by the simplicity of the impossible. Human and Corvani fingers intertwined. A future that propaganda could never have described without breaking apart. Tressa bowed respectfully. Without your truth, we would never have met. Zer looked from their joined hands to the monument behind her, to the mixed crowd, to the children who would never know the old fear. The hurt, Zer said softly, thinking of a simple complaint that had once changed everything. It hurts when I sit down, and of all the deeper hurts that followed. It was worth it. When the ceremony began and Zer took the podium, she let her gaze sweep over faces that would once have been targets. 10 years ago, she said, I expected torture. I received medical care. I expected cruelty. I received a custom chair because my spine was injured. Laughter rippled, gentle and knowing. That chair taught me mercy is not weakness. It is the courage to see enemies as people. And if we can learn that, if we can build comfort where we once built cages, then we can build a future where children meet as neighbors, not as nightmares. Applause rose, crossing species like a bridge. And Zer, once a commander falling out of the sky, felt the universe tilt again, not into war, but into something steadier, truth, carried home and turned into peace.